All right, everyone. Good morning and welcome to Agile on the Ground. I am Laurel Bellman and I'm going to be moderating this session. So I'm going to begin by introducing our presenters, followed by about 15 minutes or so of conversation between our panelists. And then they're going to answer some questions and talk about some topics that you can generate in the chat. We'll explain how that works a little bit later on. But for now, I would like you all to note that we are indeed recording this presentation, and an accessible video will be available for viewing on the IT Professionals Conference website in about a week or so. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and quickly introduce our panelists. And so I'll start with Robert Merrill. So he is an IT people person who started making software in 1977. And he came to UW-Madison in the mid-80s. He left briefly, and then he returned in 2014 as a very seasoned business analyst and agile practitioner and coach. And I will note that he was very recently named as the lead people change facilitator for DoIT's move towards lean principles. And with that, Mary Iqbal, I'm sorry, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, you are.
All right, sweet. All right. She is a hands-on Agile consultant and instructor at Rebel Scrum, and she is the organizer for this year's upcoming Scrum Day conference, scheduled for September 14th, right here in Madison, Wisconsin. And Mary has taught thousands of software professionals, and she's a very experienced Agile transformation manager. And then finally, Andrew. Andrew is an IT code person who started making software professionally in 2004, and Andrew is currently a software developer in Web Platforms Services, maybe better known as WPS, which is in Application Infrastructure Services, AIS, and that is all housed within DoIT. So Andrew most recently read the book 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals, and he suggests that you read it too. All right, so with a couple of plugs there and a brief introduction to our panelists, I'm gonna turn it over to Robert to start the conversation and explain kind of how things are gonna work here today.
Yeah, hello everybody. When we put this talk together, it grew out of what's called the Agile Community of Practice, which you should be able to find on Teams or in other ways. We'll help you find it. And we wanted a talk that would be conversational, that wouldn't be the Agile theory. You can get a lot of that excellent material out there on the internets and other places. We wanted something that would be for people who have heard just a little about Agile. Maybe they only know it as a buzzword. And for whatever reason, they are now interested in it and they're thinking about jumping in, or they've done just enough to kind of know that, oh, there's something here, but I really don't. Maybe people who are a little bit intimidated. Well, wow, I'm late to this party. It's going on now for 20 years. And maybe there's kind of the cone of shame feeling and we're not going to do it right. And we're not the cool kids or whatever. We want to lay all that to rest. So we coined this idea, Agile on the Ground. How it's really done, particularly the ways we've really seen it done personally, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And if you heard Courtney's keynote, she talked about it being a journey, and you'll learn as you go, and sometimes you'll learn more from the oh no moments or the what was that moments than you do from the successes. So what we're going to do is as you notice, we're on a journey. We're three Agilists, and we ran into one another on the bus. And we're going to start swapping stories, and for about 15 minutes. And what we'd like you to do is put questions in the chat and upvote the questions. You can use the hearts or whatever. And Laurel Bellman, who's who introduced us, is going to keep track of that. And we will use the chat as our backlog. So after we're about 15 minutes in, and if you don't know what a backlog is or you're new, you'll see. what that is. We don't have a scripted agenda of things we want to talk about, because we want to talk about what you want to talk about after the 15 minutes to kind of get things going. And we want to talk about those things kind of in the order of importance that you put on them. And you'll see how this all fits together. So the agenda will kind of build itself. So it isn't just a free form conversation. It's got a little bit of structure. So questions go here in the chat. See a question you personally appreciate, upvote it with an emoji. And we had some really fancy technical solutions that we were going to do, and then we fell back on a favorite saying of Andrew's, which is, what is the simplest thing that could possibly work? And the chat and emojis won. So we're going to see how that goes. Yeah. So yeah, here we are, 3 Agilists on the bus. How did you get in? How did you run into Agile? Did you even recognize it was Agile when you ran into it, Andrew or Mary? What was your first experience with this thing all like?
My first experience with Agile was encountering Kent Beck's book, Extreme Programming Explained. And at the time, I was a computer science student, and I was working this summer job doing IT to the best of our student abilities, which is to say pretty badly, for this little outfit, and not having any clue what I was doing. And I encountered that book, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is it. Unit tests, actually accomplishing things. And in extreme programming, like what's extreme about it is the iteration length is 1 week. So it's like, no, for serious, like on Monday, you can have a little planning and decide what you're going to do. And by Friday, you're going to have done it, or you're going to have learned something in the failing to do it. And either way, you only lost a week. And then you get to steer again the next week.
Yeah.
And it just was this fresh breath of fresh air and exciting. And I mean, this was that moment when like Agile was really cool, right? So like this was new and
cool
exciting.
Kids were
I wanted to be a cool kid. That was,
of course, who doesn't want to be a cool kid?
That was my first experience, and you know, getting very into it as a young, inexperienced student does, and talking my colleagues' ears off about it, and being very excited. And so at that time, yes, it was the index cards and the taping them to the door. It was a big door, and the Sharpies, and that's how that started.
Well, I'll let Mary go next, but I do want to set my piece up, because you, the enthusiastic young person, was the thorn in my side when I ran into Agile myself. So Mary, what was your first encounter with Agile?
Well, I kind of want to hear about that, Robert, actually, but I'll go ahead and be brief then. So my first encounter was something along the lines of maybe 20 years ago, and I was working at a distribution company, and the IT manager came to me and said, "Hey, we want to go Agile. Would you be our product owner?" And I said, what does that mean? And they said, "We just have to create a to-do list for us." And so I very helpfully wrote them a 200-page requirements document for something that I wanted. And, they didn't really appreciate that. So that was my very first encounter, and kind of learning on the job of, no, it wasn't, that's not what we needed. We did something a little bit different than that, and sort of going back and forth with them on, okay, you don't like my requirements document. What did you need? And so,
okay.
Right, learning through that was my very first experience of Agile. So
were you a developer or a trained business analyst or something that you'd write a?
No, I was a project manager who was comfortable wearing many hats, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I very hopefully wrote them that big old requirements document, and then kind of learned that wasn't what they needed. So I was able to start breaking it down, starting to create a smaller, more incremental product backlog, and then meeting with stakeholders and getting their feedback. And we did wind up in a really great place, but it was definitely a journey.
Oh yeah. Well, we all ended up in places, and we didn't. I was a BA and technical salesperson for this custom software development group in an IT services firm. So we were billable hour type, write contracts and make projects and get paid sort of people. And this was part of my 17 years away from the university. It wasn't brief as Laurel's implied, but it was 17 years, Robert's excellent adventure. But we had a guy who was sort of like Andrew, who was older than Andrew would have been at the time, probably about my age actually, but he got the Agile bug and he fell hard. And we had these just disastrous fixed price, fixed scope projects, and we were just dying under it was really bad. And we were trying to get out from under those things. And my group director had come to me and said, Robert, we need a failure-proof software methodology. And I told her, Kari, there is no such thing. And then I got to thinking about it. Well, we're going to have to redefine what we mean by failure. What does success mean? What does failure mean? Because I had been trained on time, on budget, as specified in the contract with success. And we weren't doing any of those, and it was ugly. And meanwhile, this guy was yapping at me about Agile, and it's like, oh, go away. We've got real problems to solve. This is some software development thing. If you want to do that, that's fine. You go ahead and do that. But we're trying to run a business here. We're trying to keep from going under. And then one day it finally dawned on me. Well, it wasn't one day. It was a lot of talks and a lot of arguments. What does success really mean? And we found out that success really meant something other than spec on. Well, we had to make money. We had to not burn our teams out, and we had to have referenceable customers. That was success. And once we realized that everybody was concerned about the schedule, nobody really knew what they wanted. The idea that we could run a project with variable scope as the customer was inventing what they wanted on the way, but without blowing the budget or the schedule. And we realized that Agile was how you do that. And I go, now I get it. So we bet the division on it in 2003, and we had a couple of miscues, but we won. And those were in the early days when you asked Agilists, how do you do project contracting? And they said, well, we've never done that. So we had to do a lot of inventing. And it was a lot of fun, but it was also kind of a white knuckle adventure. But it was very successful for us. And that led to a career. When I got let go from that company in 2007, that led for a sort of a 7-year stint as a independent consultant, anything you can do. But some of that was Agile coaching. And then I came to the university, and it was deja vu all over again. People were trying to figure out Agile, and they were having a lot of the same conversations and a lot of the same fears. And that's where the kind of people side came in through, of helping people, especially sponsors, through those fears. And there are a lot. And then running into the situations here at the university that I never ran into in industry, but they are what they are. It's a different place. So figuring all that out, and still figuring all that out. So simple. I don't know. What do you think is the essence of the thing?
The essence of Agile?
Yeah. What is this really all about?
I think the essence of it is delivering value in smaller pieces. So it's kind of the opposite of what I was saying when I delivered that 200-page requirements document.
Right.
That's not what we're doing here. We're delivering value in smaller pieces and accepting that that's a better way to go. We're accepting that, if there was a Scrum whisperer, what they would be whispering is, what's the most valuable thing to do next? And then you would go do that.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to plan the moon, let's plan, what are we doing next? Okay, and then after that. That's what I think it comes down to.
Okay.
Incremental delivery. I'm passionate about that one.
Incremental delivery, yeah.
I have found that Scrum teams sometimes don't embrace that concept. The best Scrum teams do, the best Agile teams embrace that idea of incremental delivery. But it's something that's hard because it's a change in the mindset.
Yeah. One of the things I stick with. Oh, go on, Andrew.
I was just going to agree. I think those are the essentials to it. Is to have identified a problem that you actually care about solving. That's key. And then what is the simplest thing you can do to make progress on that? And there's some real nuance there, because you kind of want the simplest responsible thing. And it's also valid to care about learning and what you expect to learn from doing that thing. So there's some knobs to turn there, and what do we mean by the simplest thing? But still, identify a simple, achievable next step to do, Do that. And then this part's really key. Care about the outcome. How did that work out for you? Did the problem actually get better? Did you learn something from that? And that is absolutely essential to Agile, to get that feedback loop going. I mean, because otherwise you're just doing your waterfall project in bite-sized steps, right? That the absolutely essential thing is that the outcome of that step influence in a positive way the next step that you take.
And there may be people getting on the bus with us who don't actually understand the distinction of Agile and waterfall. And I think sometimes in Agile world, waterfall becomes the bogeyman that we're fighting against. And a lot of times we're not fighting against highly structured. This familiarization, waterfall is plan your work your plan, taken to an extreme. At the very beginning, we're going to decide what we're going to do and how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost. And we're going to build a plan of who's going to do what when. And then we're going to execute the plan. And there will be deviations from the plan, but they'll be small. And that's kind of the mindset in there. So, but if I had, and I've done that, I mean, I've been on projects that did that and it worked well, and I've been on many that worked badly. And the reasons why it worked badly is of all the stuff that we didn't know at the beginning. But because of that mindset of careful planning is the key, we just sort of felt ashamed that we didn't know. But we went ahead and made a plan because that's what professionals do. Whereas I think the Agile mindset is starting at the beginning, sponsor the people who are paying the bills. And again, I came from customer world where they'd had a signed contract, and realizing we're all in the same boat or on the same bus. Only they don't know what they really want, and we don't know how long it's really going to take. How do we work together to not blow that budget or schedule constraint and give them something of value? And once you say we're on the same side of the table and none of us really knows what we're doing, we're going to have to learn and deliver at the same time. And that, to me, is kind of the essence of Agile, is a structure that lets you learn and deliver at the same time because you don't know enough at the beginning. It starts with humility. We're smart people, but we really don't know exactly what we're doing here. We are going to have to figure it out as we go. And we can't figure it out before we start. We have to figure it out as we're going, because you can't figure it out before you start. So that was kind of where I came down. And I need to check with Laurel and see if the chat's probably filling up by now. So
indeed, the chat is filling up right now.
Figured it would.
Which is great. It looks like so far the question that is getting the most interest is by Ken Han, 1114. A general question I have had, where would you draw the line between agile practice that is just doing the rituals versus being practical, approaching, and enlightening?
I'll jump in on that one.
Could you restate it just in your own words so we kind of...
Yeah, absolutely.
Ken, you should be able to unmute yourself if you wanted to further explain.
Can you hear me?
Oh.
Yes, we can hear you, Mary.
Okay. Ken, do you want to restate it?
Sure. I mean, I'm no great practitioner. I mentioned below, I kind of watch a lot of Dave Farley videos and look at people wrestling with some of this. And at least I get the impression from the people he's talked to that sometimes, you know, Agile is now branded and it's used as this thing that if you just follow these magic set of incantations, you will be Agile, as opposed to what the initial creators of things like the extreme programming, you know, and Agile Manifesto people were originally thinking when they were writing. And so I guess some of my questions are more like, where's signposts and understandings of when you may have strayed from the path? You know, I sometimes make the religious comparison, the priest who's just going through the rituals versus understanding why he's doing the rituals.
Yeah.
So I'll jump in on that one. Great question. I love this question. I think it's very insightful. So for me, I'm going to build off of what Andrew was saying just a couple of minutes ago. I do believe that it's all about continuous improvement. So if you're just scheduling the events and showing up, that's a start, but you need to be continuously improving, using that retrospective to ask, what can we do better? What can we do better? What can we do better? Are we providing value to the customer? Is this what you wanted? that continuous improvement to me is what differentiates a team that's just going through the motion versus people who are really being agile and using that as a tool to deliver value. That's my take on it. Andrew, Robert, what do you think?
I totally agree. The rituals can provide a skeleton for it, a framework for it, but they can't help you with the most important parts of it. And the most important part really is the part of the iterating where the outcome of the previous iteration influences the next iteration. And there's no ritual that makes that happen. I mean, there's rituals that create an opportunity for that. That's the point of having a retrospective. That's a point of looking at the results of your sprint in a sprint review. That's certainly the point. The idea of planning is that you would do some planning that was informed by what you've learned. Like there are opportunities, right, but none of these rituals no ritual can force that enlightenment. And that is the enlightenment of Agile, is the iterating, is the feedback loop, is the, as of this moment, like you will never know less about your project than you do at this moment. So guarantee any plan you make at this moment, it's at the moment when you know the least you will ever know. And later you will know more. And that may or may not be so relevant to steering that. And it's that steering that is Agile.
Yeah. I'm going to upvote the rituals and the structure a little bit, because I think that the process of learning Agile, particularly if you've been working or if you've been gone through, public education, and you're used to being, and public education has changed too, but you're given the assignment, you do the assignment and you get a grade, or you do what your manager tells you, or if you've been in that mindset, it's pretty hard to say, well, now I'm going to embrace team collaboration and self-organization and continuous improvement. That's a big mental shift, and it may not even feel psychologically safe to do it. So I think the thing that the structure really helps. I mean, there's a lot of different structures you can do to use this, and you could get into a whole bunch of theory. But I think the thing that the basic structure, and I think one of the reasons why the particular flavor of Agile called Scrum won in the marketplace over things like extreme programming or FDD, or there were a lot of them in the early days, is that it is so darn simple. And it's minimalistic, and it wraps the whole thing in kind of a planning framework. There's pieces missing, but there's not, you can add those in. There's not really like a whole side of it missing. So I think that if you follow the structure, because the structure is going to teach you, it's like a really good, so in a way, it's like a really good game. And if you've ever played a really good game, the game teaches you how to play the game. It doesn't need a manual. So if you have the mindset of, wow, we're going to learn things on this, we're going to have our heads in the game, we're going to pay attention. Alistair Coburn was a really influential for me in the early days when I was learning this about and he had the metaphor of like learning a sport or learning like a martial art. So he says, if you're going to learn like a martial art, you pick a discipline. There are many, but you pick one, and you go find a school, and you learn it the way they teach it. And you do that, and you get good at that. And as time goes on, you're going to naturally find yourself mixing it up. And maybe you're going to meet people from other schools, or you're going to have people that come in and they're going to have different moves that they do, or different things that they do. And you'll start to adapt it and modify it. And then you'll find out your own strengths and weaknesses, and you spar with people and things like that. And now pretty soon, maybe you study another discipline, another tradition, and now you're kind of mixing and matching. And pretty soon you're just doing. But you don't jump to just doing. And if you try to do that, you don't really learn it. So the educational term for it is scaffolding. And I think what doing by the book Scrum, and we're a lot of smart people in the university, and we like to talk about things and improve them before we've done them. So there's really a tendency, well, yeah, we're going to do Scrum, but we're going to throw out this bit, and we're going to throw out that bit, and we're going to do this because we're sure it'll work better. As opposed to having the humility of saying, no, this has worked for a lot of people. We're going to run this by the book for 4 or 6 cycles. And we're just going to keep, if we're going to follow the recipe, and we're going to eat what comes out of the recipe, and we're going to, it tastes pretty good, or ugh. And then we're going to start tweaking the recipe. But we're not going to tweak the recipe before we've made it a couple of times. So that's where, for Agile on the Ground, getting started, take Scrum. There's a ton written on it. and do it what most people I see at the university do. Do a 2-week iteration, build yourself a backlog, start delivering stuff, and follow the recipe. Do the daily stand-ups, do the retrospective, do the sprint planning, do the sprint review, do the stuff, and have a product owner and have a scrum master and look at that stuff and do the things. And over time, you will start to improve on it. But that just following the recipe. So it's a different kind of structure. It isn't a plan that tells you what to do every day, except that it kind of is. But the things that it's telling you is not how to do the work, but like how to organize the work. That it's telling you to do. You have to figure out how to do the work. So yeah, where you're getting to and then where you're going to start maybe are different things. But that's true of learning anything complex.
What an amazing analogy, Robert. That's great. I love that.
I stole it from Alistair Coburn.
Okay. Well,
Hu Sha Ri, he talks, and it's a martial arts approach. You know, you imitate, then you progress.
That's great. Another question in here that got quite a lot of reactions has to do with stakeholders. So how can we help stakeholders who are really focused on how long something will take, how much it will cost, and help them see that really it should be about what value something brings? How can you bring them around to understanding that it's agile, that it can be modified as you go along to meet the reactions and desires of the last interaction? And we lost your video, Robert, just FYI. Maybe you meant to do that.
I did. I meant
yes.
to do that.
Okay, good.
Just busted a pothole.
Yeah. Mary or Andrew, you want to start with this? How can we convince stakeholders who are focused on just they're not focused on the value?
Yeah, I think a problem is we kind of can't tell you how long it will take and how much it will cost. We can guess, we can estimate, but I don't know. Does that ever work out really well? One of my favorite Agile projects, from a prior career before I came here, there was a community college system somewhere and they needed a new system to apply for community college. And we got the contract to do that in an Agile way. It was fantastic. And so we were doing 2-week iterations at the time. And we get started on that. And we build a what do you need to do? Well, first you need to register your account to apply. Okay, so we build one of those. And then they have a bunch of feedback about that. And we were really putting the product owner role on the customer where it belongs, where they're guiding what product they wanted us to build. And so we do another iteration and we're still working on that user registration form. And that moment where it clicked, where it's like, oh, you're going to do whatever we prioritize to the top of the list. And that is then what we're going to see in sprint review. And then we're going to do a planning and we're going to prioritize and tell you what to do. And then you're going to do it. And we're going to get that. And that is all we're going to get. That was a beautiful moment because they were able to get to oh, okay, well, registration's good enough. We're moving on because there are other aspects of this that are important to us. And it was a beautiful thing. And, how long does it take to build a system to apply to college? Can anyone really answer that? I don't know. But I can tell you how much it will cost to do an iteration working on that. And we will keep doing those until you decide you're no longer getting a stream of value that's worth it to you. And that was a beautiful thing in that one project, at least.
I agree. There is that moment that people realize, oh, I have a lot more control in this way of working than I ever had before. And oh, you're going to listen to me? Oh, right. I really do feel like there's a light bulb moment that happens there.
Yeah, there is. There's a series of them, but for sponsors, that's a very definite light bulb moment. Is that when they realize that, oh my gosh, I can steer this thing. It's not like I set it in motion and hope for the best, and I signed a charter and I signed a contract, and now it's like, I can actually steer it. Another famous Agilist from the early days was a guy named Bob Martin. who everybody called Uncle Bob, and he had the mannerisms of like a Baptist preacher. But one of the things that I loved from him is he said the hardest part about Agile, especially for sponsors, is convincing them to give up the illusion of control at the beginning. And in exchange for that, they get halfway through, a third of the way into the project, they have more control than they ever dreamed possible. But in order to get it, they have to say, you know, we really don't know. So when someone asks that question of how long is it going to take, I put my business analyst hat on and I say, you know, let's talk about so what do you need? I mean, obviously something's driving the date. Okay, or we got this budget. I mean, we got this and it's fiscal year funding and then it's done. So that's all there is. Okay, I get that. That's a constraint. That's real. That's not fake. What do you mean by it? And that's where you can end up with Mary's 20 or 200 page requirements document that nobody really understands. So there's an awful lot of unknown in the it. There's a pernicious, is that the right word? A stubborn myth circulating, and I still hear it all the time, that if you have a rigid date and you really need that, you have to hit that date, that you need to do waterfall because that's how you get precision or how you get accuracy. Absolutely not true. If you have a rigid date that you dare not exceed, that's all, and there's any uncertainty at all in how long it's going to take, that's all the reason to go Agile, because you will hit that date. You may not be able to predict exactly what you will hit the date with, but it'll be the most valuable thing you could have delivered in that amount of time. And you get to figure that out as you go, rather than guessing and hoping. So there's tremendous power there. The light bulb moment for a CFO here on campus that I worked with in a big research center was they had the big date. It was for K-12 teachers, and it had to be ready when the school year started. So he was really nervous because they'd had a failure. And I told him, I says, yeah, well, we can handle that. And I didn't mention Agile. I said, yeah, we can handle that. The project management, we've learned how to do, fixed date and uncertainty. I said, how do you do that? And I said, oh, we just put all the uncertainty in the scope of what we deliver. We just don't know that. He says, but that's scope creep. That's death. Because he'd heard that scope creep is like the worst thing that can happen to your project. So I didn't say scope. I didn't say we were going to let it just do anything we wanted. We're just going to put all the uncertainty in the scope, and that's where we're going to manage it. I said, so we're going to build the most important thing, and then we're going to do the next most important thing, and then we're going to do the next most important thing. And when it's musical chairs, and when the music stops, we've got the most important stuff. We don't know what it is, but we trust on you to make that up as you go. And so it's a variable scope project that'll guarantee your date. And he leaned across the table like I'd announced that I knew how to do alchemy, that I could turn lead to gold. And he said, you can do that? And I just said, yeah, we can do that. Oh, and see, that was the light bulb moment that I had back when my friend was bothering me every day, when I finally realized this can solve my problem, as opposed to this is like right or best or what the cool kids are doing. No, this can solve my problem. And if my problem is uncertainty or overwork or burnout because of schedule pressure or requirements keep changing and we're all going crazy, it can solve that problem.
Awesome. All right, I think it's time for another question here. How do you use Agile if you manage many projects or products concurrently, each with their own independent prioritization?
Mm-hmm.
Big reaction here from the panelists.
Now we're Agile on the ground. This is how it really works, or how it has to work, because this is conditions on the ground, right?
Yeah.
No private jet for us. We're on the bus.
I'll jump in on this one. So the first thing I would encourage organizations, or someone who's asking you this question, is first we need to take a step back, and if you can, define your products, right? What are our products that we're delivering? Is our product a website? Is our product, I don't know, a distribution center? I don't know. Define your products and find out what those products are. And then if you still go ahead and do that, right? Identify product owners for each one of your products. If your organization still is running projects in addition to that, then those project managers would work with each appropriate product owner to make sure that that work is on their backlog, right? And so there's lots of different ways to do that. That is one way to approach that problem. Make sure that you're clear on what your products are. And if your organization is also running projects, those project managers now work directly with product owners to prioritize that work on their own product backlogs. So a project can span different product owners. That's one way to accomplish that. Another way you can accomplish the same sort of thing is to make sure that the product owners are talking to each other, right? So if the organization needs to deliver this large project and multiple product owners need to work together to deliver value against that product, they can make sure that they have it on their roadmap and that those roadmaps are coordinated so that we're all working towards the same end goal, right? So there's lots of different ways to accomplish that, but that is one way to accomplish that.
All of that is correct. Also, don't do that in the sense that work in progress is a problem. The amount of work in progress we have is way too high. It is not actually true that all of these things can be the top priority at once. And there is a lot of value in facing that reality. It is painful, but it is the right pain because it results in actually prioritizing and focusing on and giving attention and oxygen to the things that are actually most important. There was a project I worked on quite a while ago, and one of the things that we were trying to figure out was what metrics the system needed to collect. And, you know, speaking of 200-page requirement documents, like, oh my goodness, the ambitions were high. And so I ended up going to this meeting and listening to this for a little while. And then I think I was a little rude, but I really pushed in this direction of, okay, everybody in this meeting can have one and only one. You get one metric. We're just gonna go around the room. Everybody can write down your one most important metric. That is what we will deliver. We will do that, and then we'll come back and see if anybody wants any more metrics. And it did unstick us from ambitions that way outpaced our capacity to actually deliver, down to getting serious about here's the most important ones. Not that the others didn't also have value. Of course they did. And also I think there was, you know, some reasonable, genuine concern about wanting to architect something more powerful to be able to meet all these needs. But really what we needed to do was get experience measuring and delivering any metrics at all out of this new system before we could really responsibly think about seeing the commonalities in those and how to scale it. Do less. It will feel better, really.
Yeah, I was not meaning to imply that we should do all those projects at once, right? It's an ordered list. We're going to do this, and then we're going to do that, and then we're going to do that. All right, so yeah, I agree. Limiting work in progress is the best way to get more done.
You've both used a term. It's near to my heart. It's a lean term called work in progress, or sometimes I said work in process. There is no progress being made. What is it? What is this thing? What does it mean to you on the ground? Work in process, WIP.
You want me to jump in? Or you want to jump in?
Yeah. Is it something you measure or count?
Yeah, it's the amount of work that is currently in, like, for example, the amount of work that you currently have in process at the same time. So for example, if you have, you know, a Scrum team or an Agile team, how much are they working on at the same time, right? Are we working on 1 ticket, 2 tickets, 3 tickets?
Oh, okay.
Or all at the same time.
So you're counting tickets. You're not counting like how many hours.
No, it's the amount of things calls that we currently have in the air, right? However you want to count that, you can count that as, you know, you can segregate it down to different steps in your process if you want to, but just how many balls we currently have in the air. And the more you currently have in the air, the more complicated it is, right? And the more difficult it is to finish any one thing. That's what we're talking about here.
Okay.
But when you have, I think the best way, one of the ways I've heard it, you know, the way I think about this is we can't have 5 number ones, right? There's one number one. Let's go do that first and then move on to the next thing. that's the mindset behind this idea of limiting work in progress for a Scrum team, an Agile team in general.
Okay.
It is true. Like I read, there's a lot of great books on this topic, but to me, the best book on this particular topic it's called Kanban, and it's by David Anderson, I think it was.
Yeah.
He talked about this idea of limiting work in progress, and when you do that, they had 2 teams, right? And I've seen this work in my real day job as well. 2 teams that had relatively the same amount of experience, relatively the same amount of work in their backlog. Only one team had something like 80 tickets that they were currently working on, and another had something like 10 to 12. And the team that was working on less at the same time was able to get through a lot more work. And if you think about that, that makes sense. If you have 50 things that you're working on at one time, you're task switching, you're doing this, and there's just a lot of things that, if this breaks, then you break 5 other things. It's just too much. And so by eliminating what you're focusing on, you're actually going to be able to improve quality, and you're going to be able to deliver value sooner. So I definitely am a huge believer in this idea.
All right, well, I guess if there's no further thoughts on that, another question we had is, what's a good resource to start being intentional in our Agile practices, especially if we don't have a lot of time? And just for folks who might have joined us late, if you see a question earlier in the chat, please go ahead and upvote it. That's kind of how we're prioritizing which questions we are asking the presenters.
I also, at this point, we had a 4th collaborator, Amanda Major, who's from the University of Central Florida near Orlando. And I mention her because she's also a member of what is called the Agile Community of Practice here on campus. And the Agile Community of Practice is a great resource because it will connect you with people who are trying to do something like what you are doing and have probably run into similar problems. So if you have a nuts and bolts question, if you have a tools question, or how long should our sprint reviews be, or do we need to do a stand-up every day? You got those kinds of questions and you want to talk to practitioners, Agile Community of Practice is a great place. So I'll throw in a plug for that. The other thing that that's where we met Amanda. The other thing that Amanda contributed for use today, and it seemed appropriate here, is little tools, tips, and tricks and practices. She put up a Padlet, which you can see their Agile Tips and Tricks gallery. There's all sorts of, you can almost think of, there's these principles that you follow. There's few in number and they're relatively simple, but they're hard to apply directly. And then there's a whole bunch of practices you can do, a whole bunch of tools you can use. And you mix and match and you try that and see how it works for you. And there is no right set of tools. You got to figure out what works for you. And she's got this list. It's all these little tiles of what different things. So I'm going to put that out there just as a resource. We won't talk about it very much unless people want to go there. But those are 2 really good learning resources that are available to you on campus. And a half-hour talk with a person, there's a lot of great stuff to read. There's a lot of great content on the internet. There's also a lot of, like the internet, there's a lot of slop and a lot of consultants who are doing the best to put their kids through school and maybe not helping you all that much. But there's a lot of good material we can hook you up with for particular things.
Other suggestions from Andrew or Mary? Not really.
I think getting in the community of practice is a high leverage way to encounter more opportunities to learn more.
All right. So Robert, I don't know if you feel like you want to take one more question or if you want to move on to some summary remarks.
Well, I'm looking at Tom Calasi, and I know Tom from years ago.
Yeah.
And he's got some great questions here.
He sure does. They are great.
You can count on Tom to oh gosh, I hope nobody asks about that. And Tom asks about it. It says, WIP closely reflect the Agile team capacity and ability.
If anyone can answer my questions, it's you, Robert. I love talking to you.
Well, he's got this question here. Should WIP work and process closely reflect the actual team capacity and ability, i.e. if you have 3 FTEs full-time, you should never claim to have 14 FTEs worth of WIP. In other words, backlog it. And then down at the bottom, he's got another one that says, I am so confused by some Agile PM terms for planning and managing work items, story points. That, let's see, it just jumped. Where did it go? No matter how much I want, cannot be converted to people work hours. How the heck can I have story points worth of work and figure out how many story points can be done this sprint if people live in hours and days?
I don't believe in story points.
Okay.
I work with others who do and need to play nicely and get along with others, and that's fine. But for my part, I don't believe in story points. They're not a thing. This isn't useful. Here's how you do it. What is the most important work? Okay, can we do that this sprint? Great. Oh, we can't? Let's break that down. Okay, do we feel like that's all we can do this sprint? Or we got some more capacity? Oh, we have some more capacity? Great. What else is at the top of the queue that we can fit in this sprint? You do that exercise, plan your sprint. At no point did anything need a number. There were no Fibonacci numbers. It's not needed. What is needed, what is valuable, is to break down work into bite-sized pieces so that you have pieces that you can prioritize in this way, and to take seriously planning what can you do this next iteration. And look, some teams do story points, and I try to get along with others. That's fine. I would not choose to use story points if it were entirely up to me.
But you don't use hours either. You don't try to put an hour value.
No numbers.
Okay.
So it's totally qualitative. Like,
yeah,
can you solve this problem this sprint? You can.
But yet it's not. Great. It's not totally qualitative because you are applying the in this sprint.
Oh, totally.
Calibrator.
Yes.
So you are doing some estimating and planning, but you're doing 2 weeks worth.
Right.
Okay. And I think what Tom is getting at is that managers, people with accounting, and they've got to figure out where to allocate people. They really do want to know, how many people do I allocate over there? And how much budget is this going to take? Because I don't want to have to go back up the hill a second time and ask for more money. How do we translate from that world to the world you're describing if we don't use hours or story points or something that eventually gets back to hours? That's the question I think that Tom is asking, and I think he speaks for a lot of people.
So I can jump in there. I'm kind of thinking, which question do I answer here? Because if we're talking about estimation, right? Estimation, you can't estimate in hours. I wouldn't recommend it. You can do story points, it's fine. You can do flow metrics, right? Building upon what Andrew was saying, if you're needing to estimate and you're needing to ask, when are we going to get there? You can use this idea of flow metrics, which is, hey, we complete on average X number of tickets per sprint. Where are we going to be in 5 sprints? And use sort of a probabilistic forecast to build where are we going to be if you need to do that based on our current team size. Well, you need to get there faster. Well, what can you do to break this down smaller, like this continual refinement? But changing the topic, if you want to talk about budget, right? Budgeting for an Agile team is actually very simple, right? You've got five team members, X number of team members, right? That's going to cost you times whatever you pay them, right? Budgeting is very easy. And if you need to be delivering more value than you're receiving, then you need to have that conversation with the team on, okay, what can we do to deliver more value? Do you need more people, or do we need to break this work down smaller? Right. I'm not sure the exact question, so I kind of want to go back to Thomas and ask, where do you want to take this from here? Right. We could go a lot of different directions with this conversation, but I think we're at time.
Well, I think one of the things I wanted to build in, because we are running up, and I don't want to run this right up to the next meeting because it's not fair to them. But I think we each have like a minute or two to kind of give, if you only remember one thing from your time on the bus where you bumped into 3 talkative Agilists, what would you want our fellow travelers to remember?
I think the thing I want you to remember is the absolutely essential step of reflecting and learning from what you did, right? So in this talk, we did what we thought might be the simplest thing that could possibly work for involving the audience and collecting questions and upvoting questions using chat, right? Did the simplest thing that could possibly work. That is not the thing to take from the session, right? The thing to take from the session is, how did that work out? Did that simplest thing that could possibly work, did it work well? Did it result in us involving the audience, getting questions, picking the right questions to engage with, the right amount? What should we learn from that? That is the essence of Agile. So that if hypothetically we were to give this talk again, would we use chat in that same way? Would we go with the Google Form idea? That is the essence of Agile, is to do the simplest thing can possibly work and absolutely insist on learning from it and extracting what there is to learn from that to inform the next increment of work.
So for me, I would say if you only took one thing away, I would say it's the idea of incremental delivery, delivering things in smaller pieces. And what you deliver is completely usable. So to go back to the chat analogy, this worked, right? The solution we came up with was usable. It was fully developed, tested, and it worked, but it was small, right? And then we deliver that thing. And then we come back to the table and we ask, what should we do next? What's the most valuable thing to do next? If there was a Scrum whisperer, that's what they would be saying. And then if you deliver value this way, there is a sort of magic that happens, that you're able to forecast much more accurately. Where are we going to be 6 months from now, 12 months from now, based on the amount of work that the team is getting done? Whether you use points or flow metrics, it almost to me is immaterial which estimation technique you use. Whatever works for you. Flow metrics are certainly easier, so why make it complicated? It doesn't matter. But the thing I would want you to take away is deliver value sooner, and the magic happens of we can talk about what will be more valuable next time and where are we going to be. That incremental delivery, though, is what is at the base of Agile for me.
I'm probably going to be more people-centered, and this isn't the way I would have done it before, but today it's what it feels like, is banish shame and oughts. As a therapist once said, stop shoulding on yourself. There's no shoulds, there's no oughts. But also be very humble about what you don't know. We don't know exactly how we want this to work. We don't know how long it's going to take. We don't know a whole lot of things. So what we are going to commit ourselves to is learning. And we're going to learn in a very disciplined way. We're going to see what happened, and we're going to adjust. And if it worked great, we're going to crank the volume up and do more of it. And if it didn't work, we're going to stop after we've understood why it didn't work, or kind of have an idea why it didn't work. And we're going to keep one another safe. We're not going to turn on one another. We're not going to make promises we can't keep. And we're going to be very transparent about things, and we're going to learn as we go. And we're going to be a combination of humble, but not ashamed, because we're going to learn as we go, because we're figuring it out as we go, and we're all going to do that together. And this is Agile, the Agile Scrum or whatever, is a way to get started working like that. It's an excellent way to learn how to do that, because it'd be very hard to say, oh, we're going to do that principal thing that Robert just described, and now how do we actually do that? And we would fall right back into our old habits. However we've worked before is, well, we'd just start doing that again, because we've been conditioned for, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 64 years to do it that way. So that's what you're really about. Pick a framework, pick Scrum, run it by the book, and learn. And never stop learning.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mary, Andrew, and Robert. This has been an absolutely wonderful conversation. So unfortunately, we have run out of time, but if any of you would like to connect with any of our panelists or anyone else who practices Agile on campus, I think you should all take a look at joining the Agile Community of Practice that Robert mentioned. And I don't know, Robert, if you want to drop that link back in the chat as well. That would be a fantastic place to get started on your Agile journeys. And I'm sure all of them would be happy to answer any additional questions you have or connect via email. All right, well, we have lots of great sessions coming up this afternoon and tomorrow. So why don't you go ahead, take a break, and we will see you all again very soon. Thank you so much for joining us for Agile on the Ground.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
You know.